My daughter-in-law called the police to our house. She's crazy, and she's a danger to my grandchildren. I just looked at the officer and said, "Come in, please. I have something to show you." Her lies melted away the second I hit play. The knocking on my front door sounded like sledgehammers at 7:30 in the morning. When I opened it and saw Officer Davis in his crisp navy uniform and that serious expression they wear when they expect to find trouble, I simply smiled. "Good morning, officer. Please come in. I have something to show you." It all started with an emergency call my daughter-in-law, Sarah, had made 20 minutes earlier, sobbing hysterically that I was a crazy, dangerous old woman putting my own grandchildren at risk. According to her, I had threatened to harm Isabel and Matthew, my little treasures, 7 and 5 years old, respectively. What Sarah didn't know was that I had been recording every one of our conversations for 6 months. "Mrs. Miller," the officer said as he stepped into my living room, clearly expecting to find signs of mental instability or violence. Instead, he found an immaculate home, the aroma of fresh coffee, and a perfectly dressed, calm 58-year-old woman. "We received a very disturbing call about you allegedly threatening your grandchildren last night over the phone." I interrupted him softly, pointing him toward the sofa. "Have a seat, officer. What you're about to hear is going to completely change your perspective on this situation." I walked toward my coffee table, where my tablet rested, the very tablet Sarah always mocked, saying that old ladies like me would never learn how to use correctly. How ironic. That perceived technological incapacity had been my best disguise. "Coffee?" I offered, opening the recording application. The officer nodded, clearly confused by my composure. Most people accused of threatening children would be frantic, defensive, perhaps crying. I was serving coffee in my best china, as if we were old friends. The audio file from the night before popped up on the screen. 3 hours and 47 minutes of conversation. I pressed play, and the sound filled the room. "Linda, I need you to understand that you can't see the kids as much anymore." Sarah's voice, clear and controlled, was heard. "You're confusing Isabel with your weird stories, and Matthew is getting too attached to you. It's just not healthy." Officer Davis leaned forward. His eyes narrowed as he processed what he was hearing. In the recording, my own voice responded with forced patience. "Sarah, I'm just telling them old family stories. What's so weird about that?" "Everything," Sarah had replied. "Your tales about ghosts and old traditions are scaring them. Besides, David and I have decided we need more family space without outside interference." Outside interference. That's how my own daughter-in-law referred to me. But the part that was really going to change everything came next. The part where Sarah, believing she had hung up the phone, kept talking to someone else in her house. Her real conversation, the one that would reveal why she truly wanted to keep me away from my grandchildren. Officer Davis took a sip of his coffee, his eyes glued to the tablet. "Mrs. Miller, this is very different from what was reported." "Officer," I said, "this is just the beginning. What you're about to hear." I paused dramatically, savoring the moment. After 6 months of planning this, after so many silent humiliations, my moment had finally arrived. "What you're about to hear will explain why my daughter-in-law is so desperate to make me look crazy." I fast-forwarded the recording to minute 43, where the call was supposed to have ended, but Sarah had made a fatal error. She hadn't hung up correctly. "There," her voice was heard, but no longer directed at me. The old lady bought the whole line about the kids needing space. "Ryan, did you transfer David's money yet?" Officer Davis abruptly set his cup down. A second male voice responded in the recording. "All set, honey. $50,000 are already in our joint account. David is never going to notice. He's so busy with work, he doesn't even check the statements." My heart had broken when I first heard that. My son, working double shifts to support his family, being robbed by his own wife. But my strategic mind was already 2 steps ahead. "And the grandmother?" Ryan's voice asked. "The less she sees the kids, the less she'll suspect something is wrong. The kids always tell her everything. If she notices David is stressed or we're short on cash, she'll start asking questions. You know how nosy she is." Nosy. For worrying about my family. The officer looked at me with a completely different expression. "Mrs. Miller, who is Ryan?" "Sarah's brother," I answered, pouring my own coffee. "A charming person, as you can hear. He's been living with them for a year, supposedly between jobs." I made air quotes with my fingers. It turns out his job is stealing from my son. In the recording, the conversation continued. How much more do we need? Ryan asked. With another 30,000, we'd have enough for the down payment on the condo. Once we have the property in our name, we can sell it and head down to Miami with all the cash. David will be stuck with the debts and the kids. Heading down to Miami. My daughter-in-law wasn't just robbing my son, she was planning to abandon my grandchildren. But first, we have to make sure the grandmother doesn't interfere, Sarah continued. If she finds out anything, she's capable of convincing David to check the accounts. We need to keep her away until we finish the plan. Officer Davis was furiously taking notes. How long have you had this recording? 6 months, I replied, but it's not the only one. His expression became even more serious. There's more. I smiled. I couldn't help it. After so many months of feeling like I was losing my mind, after Sarah made me believe I was paranoid, I finally had the validation I needed. Officer, I have recordings of conversations where they admit to forging David's signature on loan documents, where they plan to use the children's ID information to open fraudulent bank accounts, and where they discuss the best way to make me look senile so no one will believe my accusations. The officer closed his notebook. Mrs. Miller, I need you to hand over all those recordings. This is no longer a family dispute. This is fraud. Of course, I said, but first let me finish explaining how we got here. Because this morning's call wasn't spontaneous. Sarah knew exactly what she was doing when she made it. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the look of anticipation on the officer's face. For the first time in months, I controlled the narrative. It all began exactly a year ago, when Sarah realized I suspected something. The day everything changed was a seemingly normal Tuesday last October. I had gone to visit David and the children, as I did every Tuesday and Friday since my husband, Robert, died 3 years ago. It was my routine, my only comfort after losing the man I shared 32 years of marriage with. Sarah was acting strange that day, I explained to Officer Davis while preparing a second pot of coffee. Nervous, avoiding my gaze. But what really caught my attention was that David looked worried. My son had never been good at hiding his emotions. In the recording I played next, my conversation with David from that day was clearly heard. Honey, is everything all right? You look tired. It's just work, Mom. It's been a tough few months at the construction site. But something in his voice didn't convince me. David had been in construction since he was 20. He had been through good times and bad. This wasn't the usual work pressure. And the house expenses? Do you need help with anything? No, Mom. Everything is under control. It was Sarah who interrupted our conversation. Linda, David already told you we're fine. We don't need you coming here to audit our finances. Audit, as if asking about my son's well-being were a crime. Officer, I said, pausing the recording. That's when I knew something was wrong. Sarah had never spoken to me like that, and David had never lied to me so obviously. What specifically made you suspicious? 2 things. First, David mentioned they had unexpected expenses for Sarah's car, but when I arrived, I saw she had a brand new SUV, a red Honda they hadn't had the week before. When I asked about it, Sarah said her brother had loaned it to her. The officer raised his eyebrows. Ryan? Exactly, but Ryan didn't have a job. Where would he get the money for a new SUV? And the second thing, Isabel told me that Uncle Ryan no longer slept on the living room sofa. He now had his own guest room. What's strange about that? It was the room David had been fixing up as a home office. He had invested 3 months of savings in a desk, a computer, filing cabinets. Suddenly it was all gone and Ryan had a fully furnished room. I played the next recording of my conversation with Isabel that same day. Grandma, why does Daddy look sad all the time? Sad? My darling? Yes, and Mommy yells at him a lot. Last night I heard Daddy tell Mommy he didn't have money for any more stuff, and Mommy yelled at him to find a way. Out of the mouth of babes, Isabel at 7 had noticed something David was too blind to see. After that visit, I continued, I started paying closer attention. In November, when I went to bring them homemade lasagna, I noticed they had new furniture in the living room, a complete sofa set that must have cost at least $20,000. Did you ask about them? Of course. Sarah told me she had bought them at a special sale. They were practically a giveaway. But when I went to the bathroom, I saw the price tag still stuck underneath one of the cushions. $45,000. The officer whistled softly. That's a pretty obvious lie. It was like she wanted me to discover her, I said, or like she no longer cared about lying well because she thought I was too dumb to notice. But what really confirmed my suspicions was what happened in December. David called me, something he almost never did. Mom, he had said, his voice full of shame, could you lend me $5,000? It's for the kids' Christmas gifts. Work has been slow. For the first time in his adult life, my son was asking me for money to buy gifts for his own children, while his wife was buying $45,000 furniture. That night, I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to find out what was really going on in that house. That Christmas was the first time Sarah forbade me from seeing the children on a special holiday. I told the officer while serving cookies I had baked that morning, as if I knew I would be receiving important visitors. The recording of that phone call on December 23rd still hurt. Linda, this year we're having a small Christmas, just immediate family. Sarah, I am family. I'm Isabel and Matthew's grandmother. Yes, but we need family intimacy. Besides, the kids are going to be very busy with their new presents. New presents my son had to borrow money from me to buy. Officer, that's when I decided to install the recording application on my phone. If they were going to exclude me from the family, I was at least going to know why. It had been my neighbor Carol, a former legal secretary, who had taught me how to set up the phone to automatically record all calls. Linda, she had told me, if your gut tells you something is wrong, it probably is. Trust yourself. I got the first important recording on January the 2nd, when they finally allowed me to visit after a whole week of not seeing my grandchildren. Grandma, why didn't you come at Christmas? Matthew had asked me with that brutal sincerity of 5-year-olds. Your mommy told me you were very busy, honey. But Mommy told Uncle Ryan they didn't want you here because you asked too many questions. Sarah appeared immediately. Matthew, go to your room now. But the damage was done. The boy had confirmed what I already suspected. My exclusion had been deliberate. How did you react to that? The officer asked. I decided to do exactly what Sarah feared I would do. Start asking questions, but intelligently. My strategy was simple. Instead of confronting directly, I started documenting inconsistencies. Every visit, I took discreet photos. Every conversation was recorded. Every lie, I wrote down in a notebook. In February, I discovered the first real evidence of fraud. David had mentioned they were tight on money. But when I came to visit, Sarah was wearing a heavy, expensive, obviously new gold bracelet that I had never seen. Did you ask her about it? Of course. She said it was a gift from David for their anniversary. But their anniversary is in August, it was February, and besides, David had just borrowed money from me. That night, I called David. Honey, I saw you gave Sarah a beautiful bracelet. Bracelet? Mom, I haven't given her a bracelet. I barely have money for groceries. His confusion was genuine. David knew nothing about that bracelet. The next day, I continued. I went to jewelers downtown to find out how much a bracelet like that cost. $15,000 minimum. The officer looked increasingly annoyed. How did your son react when you told him about the bracelet? That's the problem. I didn't tell him anything. I still didn't have enough evidence. And I knew that if I accused Sarah without solid proof, she would convince David that I was becoming paranoid. It was a strategic decision that cost me months of anguish, but which ultimately proved crucial. In March, things sped up. Ryan supposedly started working for a telecom company, but he never left the house during normal business hours. His meetings were always at night or on weekends. Did you suspect what kind of work he was really doing? I played another recording. This one from the house phone, which had called my number by mistake when he meant to dial David's cell. Ryan, did you get the documents we needed yet? Yeah, the contact at the bank is going to help me with the accounts. We just need the kids' IDs. Perfect. Once we have access to the educational credits in Isabel and Matthew's names, we can apply for up to $100,000. My blood ran cold. They were planning to use my grandchildren's identities to commit fraud. That recording had been the breaking point. It was no longer just about robbing David, but about ruining the financial future of 2 innocent children. That's when I decided it was time to set a trap. April was when I decided to change strategy. I explained to the officer playing the 5th recording. I was no longer going to be the silent grandmother who secretly documents things. It was time to make Sarah feel so secure that she would make bigger mistakes. My plan was brilliant in its simplicity. I would pretend to be losing my memory. Losing your memory? Exactly. If Sarah believed I was becoming senile, she would relax. She would talk more openly. She would be less careful. And most importantly, if I ever needed to defend my accusations, her own words would prove she had been manipulating a confused elderly woman. I first implemented my act during a visit in April. Sarah, where did you put my purse? I left it right here on the table. Linda, your purse is in your hands. What? Oh, yes, of course. How silly of me. I had seen how her eyes lit up. The prospect of me being truly senile suited her plans perfectly. In the recording I played next, Sarah was clearly heard talking on the phone with Ryan that same night. I think the old lady is genuinely losing it. Today she couldn't find her purse, and she had it in her hands. Do you think she suspects anything? Nah, she's too confused. It's perfect. If she ever tries to say anything to David about us, she'll just look like a paranoid old woman losing her mind. The officer shook his head in disgust. That woman is truly calculating, but also arrogant. Once she believed I was harmless, she started getting careless. In May, Sarah made her biggest mistake. During one of my confused visits, she left her laptop open with the bank statement on the screen. I pretended to look for my glasses while memorizing all the information I could. Account number, recent movements, balances. That night, I went to my bank and asked for help understanding what I had seen. The bank manager, Mr. Johnson, had been very clear. The movements I described were consistent with domestic financial fraud. Did he recommend reporting it immediately? He recommended I get more evidence first. Suspecting is one thing, proving's another. I needed more than numbers on a screen. In June, Sarah did something that completely changed the family dynamic. She told David that she believed I was developing dementia. The recording of that conversation was devastating. David, honey, I need to talk to you about something delicate. Your mom is acting very strange lately. Strange how? She forgets things. She repeats questions. Sometimes she doesn't know where she is. Yesterday, she asked me 3 times how old Isabel is. All lies. But David, who worked so much he barely saw me, had no way of knowing she was lying. I think she needs to see a doctor, maybe even consider an assisted living facility where they can take better care of her. I don't know, Sarah. Mom always seemed very sharp to me. That's because you don't live with her every day like we do. David, the kids are starting to get scared of Grandma's erratic behavior. Another lie. Isabel and Matthew adored me and had never shown fear toward me. Do you think we should limit her visits? I think it would be the safest thing to do, at least until we know what's going on with her mental health. The officer looked genuinely angry. That woman was systematically building a case to isolate you. Exactly, but she was also giving me ammunition. Every lie she told was recorded. Every manipulation was documented. In July, visits were reduced to once a week. In August, to once every 2 weeks. By September, Sarah had convinced David that my visits needed to be supervised. As if I were a criminal, I told the officer. But what Sarah didn't know is that every restriction she placed on me, every humiliation she made me endure, was being recorded as evidence of elder abuse. By October, I had over 100 hours of recordings, enough evidence to prove fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy. But Sarah had one more card to play, one I hadn't seen coming. November was when Sarah played her dirtiest card. I continued, switching to a recording I hadn't been sure I should show the officer until now. She decided to directly attack my relationship with the children. The recording began with Isabel crying on the phone. Grandma, Mommy says you don't want to see us anymore because we're being bad kids. My heart broke hearing that. My darling, that's not true. I love you more than anything in the world. But Mommy says you told her we were too noisy and that your head hurt when you visited. I had never said that. I hadn't even thought it. Isabel, where's your daddy? He's working. Mommy says not to bother him when he's working because he needs money for our college. At that time, David was working 12 hours a day, completely exhausted, while Sarah manipulated the children in his absence. Officer, that call made me make the hardest decision of my life. It was time to directly confront Sarah, knowing it would declare total war. The confrontation had happened on a Friday afternoon. I arrived at the house unannounced, something Sarah had specifically forbidden. Linda, you can't come without calling first. The kids are doing homework. Sarah, we need to talk. Now. In the recording, my voice was clearly heard, firm but controlled. I know you're stealing money from my son. I know you're using fraudulent documents. And I know you're using me as a scapegoat to cover up your crimes. The pause that followed had lasted almost 30 seconds. Then Sarah's voice, completely different, cold, calculated. Linda, you're delusional. This confirms what I've been telling David about your mental health. I'm not delusional, Sarah, and I have evidence. What evidence? Your paranoid old lady imaginings? Recordings, Sarah. I have recordings of all our conversations from the past few months. The sound that followed had been something dropping, probably a glass from Sarah's hands. That's impossible. You're too old to understand that technology. That's exactly why it worked so well. You thought I was a foolish old woman while I documented you committing fraud. You have nothing, Linda, and even if you did, no one is going to believe a senile old lady with dementia. Dementia? Who told you I have dementia? It's obvious. Your erratic behavior, your paranoia, your unfounded accusations. Sarah, I've never had erratic behavior. It was all an act to make you drop your guard. Another long pause, then the sound of accelerating footsteps. Does David know you record our conversations without consent? Because that's illegal, Linda. What's illegal is using minors' identities to commit bank fraud. Officer Davis was furiously taking notes. How did she react to that specific accusation? That's when she completely lost her composure. In the recording, Sarah's voice became hysterical. You're crazy, completely crazy. David needs to know what his mother is doing. Recording conversations, spying on her own family, making demented accusations. Accusations are proven in court, Sarah. The recordings speak for themselves. You are not going to destroy this family with your fantasies. I'm not going to destroy anything. You already took care of that. It was Ryan who appeared then. What's going on here? I can hear screaming from the street. Your sister just confirmed that they know I'm recording their conversations. And she also just confirmed that she knows details about bank fraud that an innocent person wouldn't know. Mrs. Miller, I think you're confused. I'm not confused, Ryan. And I also have recordings of your plans to go to Miami with the stolen money. The silence that followed had been absolute. Then Sarah had done something I didn't expect. She physically attacked me. Give me that phone right now. The sound of struggling was clear in the recording. I managed to keep the phone out of her reach, but she had managed to scratch my arm. Sarah, you're hurting me. Give me those recordings or you're going to regret it. It was Matthew who saved me, shouting from his room. Mommy, why are you hitting Grandma? Sarah stopped immediately, probably realizing the children were hearing everything. That was the last time I set foot in that house, until today. After that confrontation, Sarah went into full damage control mode, I explained to the officer, showing him the photographs of the scratches on my arm I had taken that very night. She knew I had evidence, but she also knew that her best defense was to make sure no one believed me. The psychological warfare that followed was brutal and systematic. First, Sarah convinced David to change the locks on the house. The recording of that conversation was particularly painful. David, honey, your mother is becoming aggressive. Today she came unannounced, screaming crazy accusations, and when I tried to calm her down, she attacked me. She attacked you? Look at my arm. She scratched me when I tried to take her phone because she was recording the children without permission. David sighed on the recording, clearly overwhelmed. I don't know what to do, Sarah. I've never seen Mom like this. I think she needs professional help. In the meantime, she can't be near the children when she's having these episodes. As if my legitimate accusation were symptoms of madness. Did your son believe that version? The officer asked. My son is working 70 hours a week to support a family that doesn't know it's robbing him. He was too exhausted to investigate, and Sarah took advantage of that. The second phase of Sarah's plan was even crueler, using the children as emotional weapons. November 15th, I said, playing another recording. Isabel called me crying. Grandma, is it true that you don't want to see us anymore? Who told you that, my love? Mommy says you told her we are too noisy and that we hurt you when we hug you. Another cruel lie. My grandchildren were my only joy since Robert died. But she also says that if we apologize, maybe you'll change your mind. Apologize for what, Isabel? For being bad kids and not behaving when you visit. I had to silence the phone to cry. Sarah was psychologically torturing my grandchildren to manipulate me. How did you handle that situation? I told Isabel the truth, in terms a 7-year-old could understand. That adults sometimes have problems that children didn't cause and can't fix. But Sarah had gone further. At the end of November, she started telling people in the neighborhood that I was losing my mind. My neighbor Brenda told me Sarah had said I had violent episodes, that I had threatened the children, that David was considering putting me in an assisted living facility for my own safety. The officer looked genuinely outraged. That's slander. It was a coordinated campaign to destroy my credibility before I could formally accuse them. In December, Sarah played her final card. She completely forbade me from seeing the children over Christmas and New Year's and Matthew's birthday in January. David didn't call to explain. I didn't receive any invitations. I was simply eliminated from all family events. Did you try to contact your son directly? Of course. But Sarah had taken control of his phone too. I played the recording of my call to David in January. Hello, it was Sarah's voice. Sarah, I need to speak to David. David can't talk to you right now, Linda. Why not? Because the doctor said that until you get help for your aggressive episodes, it's best you keep your distance from the family. What doctor? I haven't seen any doctor. The doctor David consulted about your behavior said that paranoid episodes can worsen if they are not treated. It was at that moment I realized Sarah wasn't just stealing money. She was building a false medical narrative to have me institutionalized if necessary. February was when I decided it was time for the final phase of my plan. I told the officer. Sarah had made so many mistakes due to overconfidence that now I had enough evidence to completely destroy her. What was your final plan? I smiled. After months of feeling helpless, the time for my revenge had finally come. I was going to use Sarah's arrogance against her. I was going to make her incriminate herself in ways she couldn't deny. My final trap required patience and an Oscar-worthy performance. I told the officer, preparing the recording that would change everything. Sarah had been avoiding my calls for weeks, but I knew there was one thing she couldn't resist: the opportunity to humiliate me one last time. In March, I called the house, feigning an emotionally broken state. Sarah, please, I need to see the kids. It's Isabel's birthday next week, and I haven't even been able to talk to her in months. Linda, we already told you it's not safe. The children are confused by your erratic behavior. Please, I beg you, just a short visit. I promise I'll be good. The pleading in my voice had been completely false, but Sarah swallowed it whole. I don't know, Linda. David is very worried about you. What can I do to prove that I'm well? See a doctor, take medication, whatever? It had been the perfect combination. A desperate grandmother begging to see her grandchildren, willing to admit to mental problems just to regain access. Well, maybe we could arrange something, but it would have to be on my terms. First, no recordings. You leave your phone in the car? Of course. Second, the visit is supervised. I am present the entire time. As you say. And third, if you behave appropriately, we could consider more regular visits in the future. It was the perfect trap, and she was walking right into it. Okay, Sarah, I accept all your conditions. Saturday afternoon, I'll be there. Of course, what Sarah didn't know was that I had already installed a digital recorder in my purse, completely separate from the phone. While she focused on controlling my phone, the most devastating evidence of her life was being documented without her realizing it. On Saturday, I arrived at the house like a submissive, grateful grandmother. Sarah was clearly enjoying her position of power. Linda, before you see the kids, we need to establish clear rules. No questions about money, work, or our family decisions. The children don't need to hear those obsessions of yours. I understand. And if David arrives, you won't bother him with your conspiracy theories about alleged financial irregularities. She had just admitted that she knew exactly what I was accusing her of, but the best part came later, when Ryan arrived at the house. How's the crazy grandma? He had said, laughing. Calmer now that she understands her place, Sarah responded. She's not talking about the bank accounts anymore. We told her that if she mentioned it one more time, she would never see the kids again. Officer Davis raised his eyebrows. You recorded that? Everything. But the best was still to come. During the visit, while I played with Isabel and Matthew in the living room, Sarah and Ryan had gone into the kitchen to make coffee. With the recorder in my purse capturing every word, they had the most incriminating conversation of the entire operation. How much more do we need to complete the plan? Ryan asked. Another 15,000. With that, we have enough for the deposit on the Miami condo and moving expenses. And David? David will stay here with the debts. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll already be settled on the beach. And the kids? The kids stay with him. I'm not going to carry responsibilities that aren't mine. The coldness with which she spoke of abandoning Isabel and Matthew chilled me to the bone. Does the old lady suspect anything? Not at all. She's so desperate to see the kids that she accepts any humiliation. Besides, I've already convinced half the neighborhood that she's losing her mind. Perfect. When are we leaving? As soon as I take the last 15,000 from David's account, 2 weeks maximum. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to save my family. What did you do with that information? The officer asked. First, I went directly to my bank and reported the fraud with all the evidence. Second, I hired a private investigator to verify the travel plans to Miami. And third, I smiled, recalling the satisfaction of that moment. Third, I decided to give Sarah exactly what she deserved. Last week was when I executed the final phase of my revenge, I told the officer, pulling out a folder with documents I had been waiting for the perfect moment to use. But first, I needed one last confirmation that Sarah was really going to go ahead with her plan. On Wednesday, I called again, once again feigning to be the desperate grandmother. Sarah, thank you so much for letting me see the kids on Saturday. It meant so much to me. I'm glad to hear that, Linda. Maybe we can make these visits more regular if you keep cooperating. I hope so. I miss them so much. I know, but all this is for your own good and the children's. Then I asked the key question. Sarah, have David and you thought about taking a vacation? You look so stressed lately. Well, now that you mention it, Ryan and I were thinking about a trip to the beach. David is so busy with work, he'll probably stay here with the kids. A long trip. Maybe a few weeks. We need a change of scenery. A few weeks. As if planning to permanently abandon a family were simply a vacation. And when are you planning to leave? Soon. We're finalizing the details. It had been the confirmation I needed. It was time to act. On Thursday, I went to the bank with the private investigator, Mr. Morello, and we met with the manager and a representative from the fraud unit. Mrs. Miller, the manager had said, after reviewing all the evidence, this is a clear case of domestic financial fraud. The movements you show us are consistent with systematic theft. What can be done? We can freeze the accounts immediately and report the suspicious activity to the authorities. But we need your son to be present to confirm that he did not authorize these transactions. My son is working 12 hours a day. He has no idea what's going on. I understand, but legally we need his direct cooperation. It had been Mr. Morales who suggested the perfect solution. What if we organize a family meeting where everything comes out, with the authorities present as witnesses? On Friday, I called David directly at work, something I hadn't done in months. David, I urgently need to see you. It's about the children. Are they okay? Physically, yes, but there's something very serious you need to know. Can you come to my house after work? Mom, what is this about? I prefer to explain in person, but David, please don't tell Sarah you're coming. Why not? Because what I have to show you directly involves her. I heard the change in his voice, the genuine concern. I'll be there at 7. That night, when David arrived at my house, I immediately saw that something was terribly wrong. He looked exhausted, thinner, with deep circles under his eyes. Honey, when was the last time you checked your bank accounts? Mom, is this what this is about? Sarah handles the household finances. I just work and hand over the money. David, I need you to see something. I showed him the statements the bank had given me, the ones that showed the unauthorized transfers, the fraudulent loans, the suspicious withdrawals. His face gradually changed from confusion to shock, from shock to horror. This can't be real. It's real, honey, and there's more. I played the recordings for him, one by one, his wife confessing to the theft, his brother-in-law planning the fraud, the two planning to abandon him with the debts. By the time I finished, David was crying. How long have you known? 8 months. But I needed enough evidence to protect you and the children. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because she had you convinced that I was losing my mind. Would you have believed me without evidence? David shook his head slowly. We both knew the answer was no. What do we do now? Now, honey, we're going to give Sarah exactly what she deserves. The plan for Monday morning was simple, but devastating. David was going to confront Sarah with all the evidence while the authorities waited outside, but Sarah decided to accelerate her own timeline. That morning, I was woken up by the phone. It was David whispering, "Mom, Sarah is preparing to leave today. She has the suitcases packed and she's moving money from the accounts. Where's Ryan?" Loading the car. "Mom, they're going to take the kids." It was time to implement the emergency plan I had hoped never to use. David, call the police now. And so I arrived at this moment with Officer Davis in my living room, listening to the evidence that would destroy Sarah and save my family. But what none of us expected was that Sarah was going to make one final, desperate, and dangerous move. "Officer Davis," I said, putting away the recordings. "What is about to happen will determine whether my grandchildren grow up with their father or if Sarah manages to manipulate the situation one last time." Just then my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, Sarah says she's going to call the police to report that you are harassing her with false accusations." "Tell her it's already too late for that." "Son, what do you mean?" "Tell her to look out the window." I heard David move away from the phone, then a scream from Sarah. "Why is there a patrol car outside?" "Why?" David had replied with a voice I hadn't heard in years. "My mother was right about everything." Officer Davis stood up. "Mrs. Miller, I think it's time we go resolve this situation." When we arrived at David's house, the scene was exactly what I had imagined. Sarah was on the porch, hysterical, yelling at another officer who had arrived in response to her emergency call. "That woman is harassing my family. She's making up lies because she has dementia." The officer who responded to her call looked confused until Officer Davis approached. "Sergeant Thompson, we have evidence that the person who made the harassment call is involved in domestic financial fraud." David came out of the house with Isabel and Matthew by the hand. The children looked scared but lit up when they saw me. "Grandma!" Isabel cried, running toward me. "Grandma, why are there police?" Matthew asked. I hugged them tightly, inhaling the scent of their hair, feeling their small bodies trembling against mine. It had been months since I had been able to hug them like this. "Everything's going to be fine, my loves. The police are here to help." Sarah saw me hugging the children, and her hysteria intensified. "See? She's manipulating the kids. Officers, that woman is dangerous." But Officer Davis had already shared the information with his colleague. Both approached Sarah with a very different expression. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us to answer some questions about fraudulent financial activity." "What? That's ridiculous. The only criminal here is that crazy old woman who records conversations illegally." "Ma'am, the recordings you mention are completely legal when documenting criminal activity." It was then that Ryan appeared, carrying suitcases toward a car I didn't recognize. "Sir," Sergeant Thompson said to him, "we need you to put those bags down and come with us too." "What is this about?" "Financial fraud, conspiracy, and fraudulent use of minors' identity documents." Ryan's expression instantly changed. He dropped the suitcases and looked at Sarah in a panic. "What did you tell them?" "I didn't tell them anything. It's the old witch. She has recordings." And there it was, the final confession, admitting in front of the officer that she knew about the recordings and that there was something in them that incriminated them. David approached Sarah. His voice was trembling with contained rage. "Sarah, why? Why did you do this to me? Why were you going to do this to the kids?" "David, I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain. I listened to the recordings. I heard how you planned to leave me with the debts and abandon Isabel and Matthew." Sarah looked around desperately, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Her eyes settled on me with pure hatred. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't interfered, none of this would have happened." "Sarah," I said calmly, "this happened because you chose to rob my son and abandon my grandchildren. I just documented your decisions." The officers began to handcuff Sarah and Ryan. As they led them away, Sarah screamed one last threat. This isn't over, Linda. I'm getting a lawyer. I'm suing you for harassment. Sarah, I replied, when you get out of jail in a few years, if you get out, I'll be here taking care of my grandchildren while my son rebuilds his life. You'll just be a bad memory. 3 hours later, I was in David's kitchen preparing hot chocolate for Isabel and Matthew while he talked on the phone with the bank to start the process of recovering the stolen money. Grandma, Isabel said to me, is Mommy coming back? I don't know, my darling, but what I do know is that Daddy, you, Matthew, and I are going to be together and safe. There won't be any more yelling in the house. No more yelling, Isabel. Matthew snuggled into my lap. Grandma, why did Mommy say you were mean? Sometimes, my love, when people do bad things, they blame others so they don't feel bad about themselves. David hung up the phone and sat with us at the kitchen table. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't documented all this, David, you're my son. Isabel and Matthew are my grandchildren. I would do anything to protect them. But you lost months with the kids because of me. I treated you like you were crazy when I was doing what every mother and grandmother would do, protect her family. That night, for the first time in almost a year, I had dinner with my grandchildren in their own house. I read them stories before bed and sang them the lullabies I had sung since they were babies. As Isabel and Matthew slept peacefully in their beds, David and I sat in the living room. What's going to happen now, he asked me. Now, son, you're going to be the single father you were always capable of being. The children will grow up knowing that their grandmother protected them when they needed it most, and Sarah will face the consequences of her decisions. Do you think they can ever forgive her? That's not for me to decide. But what I do know is that Isabel and Matthew are going to grow up in a house full of real love, not manipulation and lies. David nodded. Then he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Mom, can you stay tonight? The kids have slept better today than they have in months. Of course. That night, as I listened to the quiet breathing of my grandchildren from the guest room, I thought of Robert. My husband always told me that family protects itself, no matter the cost. It had taken 8 months, 100 hours of recordings, and more patience than I knew I had, but I had managed to save my family. Sarah had underestimated a grandmother determined to protect her grandchildren. Her biggest mistake was believing that age made me vulnerable, when in reality it had made me wiser, more patient, and much more dangerous than she ever imagined. The next day, Isabel asked me, Grandma, how did you know Mommy was lying? My darling, I replied, when you truly love someone, you always know when something isn't right. And when someone tries to hurt the people you love, you do whatever it takes to protect them, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. That afternoon, watching Isabel and Matthew play in the garden with their father, I knew that every moment of pain, every humiliation, every sleepless night, planning my revenge had been worth it. Sarah had learned that you should never underestimate the power of a grandmother fighting for her family. And I had learned that at 58, I could still be the hero of my own story.